The first time I saw the bruise, I told myself it was nothing. The second time, I felt a knot form in my stomach. By the third week, when a new purple mark bloomed along my father's forearm, I stopped asking questions out loud and started asking them in my head. My father had new bruises every week, and whatever was happening in that quiet living room when I wasn't there, he clearly didn't want me to see it. My dad has always been a strong man. Not loud, not dramatic, the kind of strength that shows up early and stays late. He worked 35 years at the same factory. He never missed a mortgage payment. He fixed his own sink and his neighbor's fence. When my mom died, he learned how to cook for one and never complained. So when I noticed the bruises, I assumed accidents. He was getting older. His balance wasn't perfect anymore. He joked about bumping into furniture that keeps moving. He laughed. I laughed with him. That's what families do when they're scared. But the bruises didn't look like clumsy bumps. They were too dark, too often, sometimes on his wrist, sometimes on his upper arm, once faintly near his collarbone. "Dad," I said one afternoon, trying to sound casual, "did you fall again?" He didn't look up from the TV. "Nah, just old skin, shows everything now." That answer should have satisfied me. It didn't. I started coming over more often. I'd bring groceries he didn't ask for. I'd stay longer than usual. I'd watch him move around the house. He moved slowly, yes, but carefully. No limping, no flinching. And yet, every week, there was something new. I lay awake at night, imagining things I hated myself for imagining. A caregiver being rough. Someone taking advantage of him. Him hiding something out of pride. Or worse, fear. I asked my sister if she'd noticed anything. She lived 2 states away. She said I was overthinking. "Dad's fine," she said. "He'd tell us if something was wrong." But I knew my father. He wouldn't. He raised us to carry our own weight. To not complain. To protect even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The idea came to me one night at his kitchen table. He was asleep in his recliner. The TV murmured softly. His hand rested on the arm of the chair, and I saw a yellowing bruise just starting to fade. I hated myself for thinking it, and then I hated myself more for knowing I was going to do it anyway. I installed a small camera in his living room the next day. I told myself it was for safety, in case he fell, in case he needed help. That part was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I needed to know. The camera was tiny, hidden on a shelf angled toward the couch and the space near the coffee table. I made sure it didn't point toward the bathroom or hallway. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I was trying to protect him. At least that's what I told myself. The first few days, nothing happened. I checked the footage obsessively. Morning, night, between meetings. I saw my dad napping, watching old game shows, folding the same blanket he always folded the same way. I started to feel foolish, paranoid, guilty. Then, on the 4th day, I saw something I didn't expect. The front door opened, and my nephew walked in. Evan is my sister's son. He's 11. He's smart in a quiet, intense way. He doesn't like loud noises. He hates sudden changes. My sister had asked my dad to watch him after school while she adjusted to a new job. It was supposed to be temporary. I hadn't thought much about it. In the footage, Evan dropped his backpack and went straight to the couch. My dad smiled when he saw him. He always did. That soft smile he reserved for children and old memories. They sat together for a while. They didn't talk much, just watched TV. Then something shifted. Evan started rocking, just a little at first, then more. He covered his ears. His breathing changed. I leaned closer to my phone. My dad noticed immediately. He muted the TV. He spoke calmly. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the tone. The same one he used when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. Evan shook his head. hard. His hands clenched, and then, without warning, he lashed out. Not violently, not with rage, with panic. His arm swung back and hit my father's wrist. Evan froze. My dad didn't. He gently moved closer, wrapped one arm around Evan, and pulled him into his chest. Evan struggled. His elbow hit my dad's shoulder, again and again. My father didn't push him away. He didn't raise his voice. He just held him. "It's okay, I could barely make out. I've got you." My chest felt tight. The episode lasted less than 2 minutes. Evan eventually collapsed against my dad, exhausted. My dad rubbed his back slowly, like counting breaths. When it was over, my father winced, just slightly. He flexed his wrist. I saw the exact spot where the bruise would later appear. I sat there frozen, staring at my phone. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a bad moment, but the footage didn't lie. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched it happen again and again, not every day, but enough. Evan had sensory overload episodes. My sister had told me he was anxious lately. She hadn't told me this. Every time, my father handled it the same way. He stayed close. He stayed calm. He took the hits meant for no one. He never reacted with anger. He never called for help. He never complained afterward. He would just sit quietly once Evan left. Sometimes he rubbed his arm. Sometimes he stared at nothing for a long time. That's when I noticed something else. My father never marked the bruises, never iced them, never mentioned them. But he did something I hadn't seen before. He started wearing long sleeves, even indoors, even when it was warm. I felt sick. I realized then that the bruises weren't a mystery. They were a choice. The next time I visited, I couldn't look at him the same way. He poured coffee. He asked about my job. He joked about the weather. And I saw everything differently. "Dad," I said finally. "How's Evan doing?" He paused. "Just a bit too long. He's a good kid." "I know," I said, "but is he okay here?" My dad met my eyes. Something flickered there. Fear or resolve. "He needs someone calm," he said. "Someone who won't make him feel like he's bad for being overwhelmed." I swallowed. "Is he hurting you?" Silence. Then my father smiled. Not the warm one, the protective one, the one that shuts doors. "He doesn't mean to," he said, "and he feels terrible afterward." "That doesn't make it okay," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. My dad set his cup down carefully. "It makes it understandable." I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't his job, that he didn't have to sacrifice himself, that there were professionals for this. But then he said something that stopped me cold. When I hold him, he said quietly, he feels safe, and when he feels safe, the world hurts him a little less. I didn't know what to say. I drove home and cried in my car like a child. That night I watched the footage again, not to catch something, but to understand. I saw a man who was tired, a man who was aging, a man who still chose to show up, and I saw a boy who wasn't dangerous, just overwhelmed. The emotional peak came a week later. I got an alert from the camera during work. Motion detected. I opened it immediately. Evan was in the middle of a severe episode, worse than I'd seen before. He was crying hard. His movements were frantic. My dad was on the floor with him, speaking softly, taking the brunt of flailing arms. One swing caught my dad near the jaw. Not hard enough to be violent, hard enough to hurt. I stood up from my desk. My heart pounded. "Dad," I whispered to a screen he couldn't hear me through. Evan finally calmed. He curled into a ball. My dad sat there for a long time afterward. He didn't move. Then he did something that broke me. He kissed the top of Evan's head. And then, alone in that quiet room, my father cried. Not loudly, just enough. I left work early. I drove straight to his house. When I walked in, Evan was gone. My dad was in the kitchen, holding a bag of frozen peas to his cheek. He looked surprised to see me. "I know," I said before he could speak. He didn't deny it. He just nodded. We sat down, no yelling, no accusations, just truth, laid bare. "I didn't want her to worry," he said about my sister. "She's already stretched thin." "And you?" I asked. "What about you?" He shrugged. "I can handle it." I took a breath. You shouldn't have to. That was the hardest part. Convincing a man who had built his entire identity around endurance that his pain mattered too. We talked for hours. About Evan, about boundaries, about getting help, about honesty. The resolution didn't come easily. It came slowly. My sister cried when we told her. Not out of anger, out of guilt, out of relief. We found a therapist who specialized in sensory regulation. We adjusted schedules. We made sure my dad wasn't alone with episodes anymore. The bruises stopped appearing. But something else changed too. My father started speaking up, just a little. He admitted when he was tired, when something hurt, when he needed help. Months later I removed the camera. I didn't need it anymore. The living room went back to being just a living room. Sometimes I think about those weeks, about how close I came to misunderstanding the truth, about how love doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it looks like quiet sacrifice that no one asks for. But I also learned something important. Protecting others should never require erasing yourself. Strength isn't staying silent forever. And love grows deeper when it's shared honestly, not carried alone. My father still has strong hands. They just don't carry everything by themselves anymore.